if you had too much power, it's going to blow the speaker, or the sunburn effect, you're going to be, you're going to burn it out. But just that right amount of it. And you can think, I guess, more like the suntan, like you're getting enough to prime without overdoing it.
Welcome back to another episode of the Peak Performance Life podcast. And today we have the OG Jason Sani back on the podcast. So excited to catch up with you, brother. It's been a while, and I know you've been doing some amazing things. For those who listened to some of our first podcasts, Jason was, some of our first and some of our best and most downloaded, highly rated podcast episodes. Jason's a certified nutritionist, certified personal trainer. If you see a super good looking ripped guy on our Instagram account, it's not me, it's Jason. He's just someone who really walks the walk, and he's helped a lot of people. His own results speak for himself just by looking at him, and you can see, but also, people he's worked with, and actually he's working with my right-hand man here at Peak Performance, and he's been raving about working with you as well. So really excited, Jason. Thanks for coming back on with us.
Oh, awesome. It's good to be back. I love everything about, the whole Peak Performance life and movement. And so, I always love to catch up, and I'm excited, to be able to deliver some good nuggets for people. Awesome.
So let's catch up with sort of a bit of an update. Like, have you changed in the past couple of years? Have you trained? We'll talk about your clients after, but for you personally, have you changed much about how you work out, how you eat? What's kind of like maybe sort of the evolution over the past couple of years, maybe for you?
Absolutely. I think I have some fun things, some thought-provoking, ideas, for people as I've aged a little bit more, all relatively, but, given I'm going on 37 now, it's inevitable that most people will change the why behind their training, whether it's the time and the purpose they're doing it, what they're training for. And for myself, I can say, I've been able to relate more to the client base that I've worked with for years, being busier, taking on more projects. I always joke around. I have friends that, are quote unquote fitness influencers online, and they're constantly posting, what their physiques look like on a regular basis. And I kind of laugh at that, because I'm thinking, and certainly we all like to flex occasionally, but I think that, it's easy to do that if you love to do it and that's what you're doing for a living. But we need to make it realistic and, approachable, something that isn't too intimidating for the people that don't have that time. So for me, being busier, planning a wedding, being expecting father, and having puppies and traveling more, I've been, served up that slice of humble pie at times, and I've felt the effects of aging. So for me, still number one, it's consistency. So it's making sure that I'm able to move if I have any limiting factors, such as, limitations. It could be back pain from traveling a lot. It could be, poor movement patterns from sitting and traveling, just overuse from certain muscle groups. And so where I'm going with all this is I've prioritized mobility more than ever. It's something that I've gotten advice from, people that I look up to that are still, that still are doing great things, whether it's just going on adventures and still able to say yes to, all those adventures of life. And it's just prioritizing, making sure that you still can move well, you still are feeling good. So I'd say the biggest thing that's changed is that comes number one. And for some people, maybe that is common sense, but it's something that every day, non-negotiable. I'm doing mobility. I'm prioritizing that more. And I love to work out just as much as anybody that and there's times where now I'm listening, I'm recovering as hard, if not harder, than I train. I'm taking longer to warm up. Instead of feeling like I need to work out every day and chasing that cortisol junkie that I talk about with people, I'm going in and I'm just doing strictly mobility on some days. So that's the biggest thing that changed. We can dive in further.
That's awesome. I mean, man, I was thinking the same thing recently. Like, I was literally thinking, I need, because right now I do boxing, a trainer who does boxing and jujitsu. I actually do gyrotonics, which at Lifetime
Yeah.
once a week, which I'm kind of the only dude in there, but that's okay. Um, I ever since I had a few years ago, and I had some back pain, I started doing it, and I just loved it, getting that mobility in my spine, and yeah, just getting that movement, because I do feel like so many of us we're doing like stiff weight movements, right? Like you're doing bench press, you're doing shoulder press, you're doing, whatever it is, but there's no like kind of twisting, turning sideways, lunging. Yeah, I don't really even do many lunging to the sides or anything like that, I realize. And I'm like, man, I'm really, and I could tell like my hips are tighter. I'm lacking that mobility. And I was like, I need to do like some mobility training. And so it's interesting though, like do you have any recommendations for, let's say, someone like me, actually, or others listening that are like, and then on the other hand, you have people who just love cardio, right? They're like
Sure.
Peloton, run, cardio 6 days a week, right? Or you have like the straight up weights guys doing like the stiff weights, but you don't hear, it's not really sexy, right? You don't hear a whole lot of people talking about like, oh yeah, I had a great mobility workout today or something,
Yeah.
right?
I'm trying to change that. I wish more people would prioritize. And I think people's future selves, if you can have a relationship with your future self, would probably want you to prioritize that as well. I've kind of coined a term, metabolic mobility, and that's my alternative to just going and doing like a cardio workout. It's, mobility is strength and movement. It's allowing you to be more flexible, so you have better range of movement patterns. You can lift your arm over your head. Because when you have better mobility, the strength training that you're doing is going to be more efficient and effective. That's undeniable. You're going to feel better. You're going to move with less pain. My best suggestion for people is think about, first of all, have somebody look and make sure that you don't have poor movement patterns, or that you might need some corrective movement. It's worth investing, even if you work with somebody like once a month, and that could be a trainer, it could be a physiotherapist that's probably available at your gym. And sometimes it's just assisted stretching that you might want somebody to help with. And then when it comes to training, as good as it feels to work out, we get that adrenaline rush, we get that cortisol, that fight or flight. It feels good. And a lot of people seek that. So a lot of people in the Peloton world, I don't want to point out them specifically, but these cardio classes, they're cortisol junkies. They love that feeling they get. But a lot of times it comes back down, it crashes, and they want that feeling again. They know it's always there for them. So I recommend finding, some balance, because in a world right now where people are overstressed, overstimulated, mobility can really calm us down. We can get in tune with our breath. And then with your movements, have fun with it. Like unilateral movements alone could switch up your routine and make it so much more fun. What I mean by that is working on some of the balancing aspects. So if you're always squatting or doing leg press or doing deadlifts, do some single leg, work, do some lateral lunges, do some Bulgarian splits. And they're not going to be fun at first. And you're going to drop the weight. You're going to have to humble yourself. But that newness factor should get you excited enough that, hey, this is something that's new. Taking a break from what you're doing, you're going to come back and appreciate what you're doing so much more. And you probably expose some compensation patterns, some weaknesses that you may have had. So the way to sum that up is, if you have classes, like jump in some classes at your local gym. If you're traveling, make that an excuse to hop in something new and give yourself some inspiration, and, take note that way. But I think everybody, you don't necessarily need to do yoga, but something like that, that's different than what you're doing, is going to, I think, carry over and keep things interesting, keep things fun. That's my best advice there.
Nice. I like that a lot. And I agree. I know I need to either get a trainer or start jumping into some of these like classes that I see, some of these alpha classes at the gym or whatever, where they're switching it up. It's just like I see them and it's like, okay, they're doing different stuff than what I'm normally doing, right? Yep. So just switching it up, getting some different range of motion in there. That's great advice. What about any other last resources potentially for mobility? Because a lot of people hear mobility, they're like, okay, well, what do I do? Is there any good, for people who aren't close by to you and can't work with you in person? Like I've heard of ROMWOD or something like that. Or is there any good kind of resources or YouTube videos that you like?
Yeah, so I mean, ROMWOD is a good one. I have a few resources. If you look up my name and put morning mobility routine, I do a variation of that every day.
Oh, nice. So Jason Sani, mobility on YouTube, we'll find it.
Yep. Yep.
Cool.
I have one that's called like hip. I think it's hip back mobility. But what
Nice.
I recommend is like, let's say you have lower back pain or and you might have knee pain and it starts in your hip or your lower back. You might have ankle pain and it could be vice versa. Like, so type in mobility routine for that and find a sweet spot. Like
Mm-hmm.
and I'm not saying you need to do it for 30 minutes, type in 5-minute mobility routine or 10-minute
Mm-hmm.
mobility routine, and then watch that a couple times. You need to associate with you feeling better and you unlocking new movements and freedom in movement. And once you have that, take the piece that you like from it. Maybe it's 1 minute, 2 minutes, and then you can do it in the morning or do what you've been talking about a lot lately is fitness snacking. So let's say you're working, from the computer all day. I like to do the Pareto principle where I'll work for 20, 25 minutes and I'll take a 5-minute break. Whatever yours is, take 5 minutes and do that stretch, that little mobility routine. And we know that we're going to get an energy increase, or creativity is going to go up. And you're going to boost your metabolism. So that's a way that you can get some inspiration and fit it into your day and just make it a goal. Put it in, schedule it like you have a call, but it's something that pays off in dividends. And I think that you can have a lot of fun with it when you notice that, hey, you're going to get more core development and you're going to boost your metabolism and you're going to move better.
Yeah. Yeah. And also it sets you up for being able to do strength training, without getting that back pain or what. I feel like most back pain is like comes from hip stuff, or other parts, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I have to touch on the pain thing because I mean, working with legitimately 1,000+ people, like on a personal basis, I have to say, like, there's so many people that tolerate pain and just think that that's something they have to live with and tolerate.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, if you, and for most people, it just gets worse and worse. You get more stiff. If you have an issue and it's in your hip or your back or your knee, whatever it is, see somebody about it. Like, go to your gym and say, who would you find a trainer and say, who would you recommend? But like, your energy will increase tenfold if you don't have those limitations that are in the back of your head, and inflammation that's going to just be haunting you. Because, it could be the way that you sit, it could be the way that you breathe. And we notice it more now when a lot of times people will see themselves in a picture and see themselves just kind of sloped over. Well, hey, if I'm sloped over and my shoulders are sloped down, my breathing is going to be affected, which is going to affect my energy, which is going to affect my cortisol. I'm going to find myself in my sympathetic nervous system more often. So this all goes back to mobility. It's such a loaded topic, and I wish people would look into that a little bit more.
Nice. Well, I'm definitely going to check out your YouTube video, and I need to set myself like some sort of reminder at least a few times a day, which you said makes so much sense, like a 5-minute break. Because sometimes I'm like at the desk and next thing you know, 7 hours have passed and I'm still standing here, and standing is great. I have a standing desk, which is great. On leg day, after leg day, maybe I'll sit down and move the desk down. But also standing, sometimes the part people don't talk about, your hips can get tighter when you're standing all day,
Yep.
just in kind of a set position. So I really need to move a lot more. 5 minutes, 3-4 times a day could be a huge difference for me.
Time.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'll touch on one thing. When it comes to mobility, like, your mobility routine might be a little bit different, but use somebody else's for a model. But like hip flexors, for example, so much of us have tight hip flexors. So trying to do something that gives you external hip rotation. Like, my favorite stretch is a 90-90 stretch, which is like you're creating 90-degree angles with both of your knees. Probably hard to imagine, like the pigeon pose in yoga.
Mm-hmm.
It's an active stretch. So when I think mobility, it's an active movement. You're taking inventory. Think about it that way. You get a chance to take inventory on what feels good. And what I've heard and I've gotten feedback from my clients is, when you do these little mini fitness snacks or mobility routines, you're feeling more agile throughout the day. You're more likely to move and get that non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is going to keep your body burning more calories. And you're just giving yourself little wins, and that little momentum just keeps you feeling better. It keeps you feeling young. Like,
yeah,
that's the coolest thing.
I love that, fitness snacks. Instead of next time I'm like, oh, I'm bored, let me get a snack. I'm gonna think about fitness snack instead, and do a little fit. And you're right. I mean, on the days when I don't go to the gym, I actually found that like I got to do some sort of movement, because I found that the days where I would just be in front of a computer, let's say 7, 8 hours straight, and not go to the gym, I didn't feel good. Like I didn't feel, my mind didn't feel energized,
Mhm.
my body didn't feel good. And so then I'm not even performing. Like I could literally work half the time and go to the gym for 90 minutes, do some great warm up mobility, do some weights, and get more done, be more productive, and have better quality of work than if I didn't do it at all. So yeah, I really love that. Let me ask you a couple questions, I guess selfishly, about kind of in terms of weights, right? So for many years, I kind of learned about weightlifting from the Arnold Schwarzenegger Encyclopedia to Bodybuilding, 20
Oh
years ago,
yeah.
or whenever it was. And he just
It's the
had
Bible
every,
2.0.
yeah, it was this huge book that had every single, workout for every body part that he did when he was training. But these days you're hearing a lot about different stuff, right? So I guess that the Arnold thing has kind of been, it's kind of being called, what is it called these days? The bro splits or something, right?
Sure. Yep.
And so like, I don't know, they feel good to me, right? Like if I do buys and tries, what I like about that is that I can do a set of buys and I can do a set of tries, and I don't have to kind of rest for, just wait 2 minutes in between or something. So I like that aspect of it. But I've been hearing a lot about push and pull routines
Yeah.
versus kind of these bro splits, I guess you call it. What do you like to do? And what does a push pull routine kind of look like?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and so again, there is research and data that shows that getting more stimulus to muscles throughout the week has been shown to build more muscle. And specifically, what a study was shown that, let's say you did 30 sets for a body part, and specifically chest. Now, if you did it in a traditional split route, you do that once per week. Maybe some people do twice per week. You're waiting however long. It could be, if you do it twice per week, maybe 96, 72 hours, whatever. The research shows that if you take that same amount of splits, reps and sets, and split it up over 3 times per week, you're going to get a better result. You're not going to
Mm,
be over exhausting that muscle. You're sending more frequent stimuluses, like muscle building signals, essentially, think about it that way, to the muscle. And you're never going to be super sore and overdoing it. And so
mm,
what I can take from that is, if you did a push and pull split, very common. Some people will do 2 rounds per week, which would go, for instance, Monday's a push day. So all push movements, triceps movements, shoulder dominating movements, chest movements, even throwing, maybe a little bit of leg stuff. And then the pull movement could be the next day. That's biceps pulling. You could work your traps, your back.
mm-hmm.
And then you have a leg day. That's how, this is the most common way that people do it. And
Okay, so so leg day is usually separate. So you have a push, pull, and leg is kind of the routine.
for a
Okay.
lot of people, go push, pull, leg. Some people take a day off, and you repeat push, pull, leg, take a
Yeah.
day off. Now, I also see people do push pull where, and this is my style that I prefer, would be a push day. And now I'm going to do push leg movements. That's going to be some
Yeah.
squats. That's going to be, it could be a form of leg press or so on. And then my pull is going to be same thing, lats, biceps. And then I'm going to do some hamstring, maybe hip hinge style types of movements. And then
Mm,
I'll have a day that might be just hit focused, where I might get on the assault bike and do some sprints or low impact. I can push myself that way, or take a mobility day.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What I prefer is doing more full body workouts. So 3 to 4 full body workouts per week, where I'm hitting those compound exercises, but I'm not overdoing it. So for instance, I'm going to do legs 3 times per week. And I always do,
Wow.
but it's not like, oh, I worked my legs so hard I can barely walk. I barely even notice it, except for like during my workout and after it, but I still feel like I'm getting stronger. The periodization is really helpful in something like this, meaning you start at doing sets of higher reps, like 20 reps. And then your next week you focus on 15 reps. And the next week you focus on maybe 12 rep range, and then 10. And by doing that, you're going up in the repetitions. Down the repetitions, up in the weight. That gives you something to follow. By doing that, it's progressive overload. You're going to be moving more
Mm-hmm.
volume with the weight. But here's what happens when you do that. It's more fun. You can do more variety. I mean, that's obviously subjective. but you're never going to feel like you just overdid it. You're getting to tap that stimulus. And I think there's something about doing a full body workout that you're going to feel better throughout the week. And it's up to you. Are you trying to add in a whole bunch of volume and target, hypertrophy and just growing your muscles? Or are you trying to build strength? Are you trying to build performance side of it? And all that can vary based on your goals, but it's really important that you mix that up. Like you don't want to just focus on that same type of routine for week on week on week on week. Think that 4 to 6 weeks or so, you should be switching into a slightly different variation with your rep range at least.
Yeah, that's really good. Cause I mean, when I do leg day, I do it like really hard. And then I'm sore for like 2 days and it takes a lot out of me. I usually take a day off after I do legs and shoulders, right? So typically I'm doing like chest and back, bis and tris, whatever, arms, and then like shoulders and legs. Because I just like to do things back to back, where if it's opposing muscle groups, I don't really have to rest much in between sets. But I know I definitely need to switch it up. But after legs and shoulders, man, I'm creamed, I'm done, and sometimes I get tight too in my neck. So like my recovery is not as good as it could be. I have to take a day off the next day because I'm just straining so hard sometimes. Yeah.
So here's my observation, like me looking at a routine like that, is I'd say pick your main entree. Like with legs, realistically, you're going to get the most bang for your buck with a compound lift, like a squat, or a deadlift, or a trap bar, like, type of squat or deadlift.
Yeah, I'm always doing deadlifts and squats for sure. Yeah.
So here's what I would just try out, and it's going to feel different at first, but by targeting that towards the beginning of your workout, so let's say I did squat on Monday, and then, Wednesday I did deadlift to start out with, and then Friday I did some like single leg movements or lunges or something explosive. Now, by doing that, we know that when we work our legs, we're waking up our nervous system, because our legs are going to require so much energy, so much blood flow. And maybe you can relate to this. Think about a time where you did legs and then you went and bench pressed or did pull-ups and you're like, wow, I just felt stronger. You've woken everything up. Your nervous system is more awake. And you can do that by doing like jumping style type of movements as well. But there is, the research isn't loud and clear that we increase our testosterone with leg movements, but there is definitely some data that has shown that, our testosterone, our free flowing testosterone, can be elevated when we're working at bigger muscle groups. Is it specifically because it's your biggest muscles, or is it because you're generating more blood flow, and it could link back to like survival of fight or flight and us needing like strength to catch our prey or predator, as a predator. But that is something to think about. I have a lot of fun with that. And I just noticed, even though I don't want to do it, because legs are one of those things where people have a love and hate relationship. But like if I do like single leg squats and then I go in, I just feel like I'm more awake for whatever else I'm going to do. And so that, I'm with your workouts, to not overcomplicate things, like you're picking a main entree. So like my squat and my shoulder press is going to be a main entree. Maybe I'll do a push press. And then the next day I'll do like a hip hinge thing, like a deadlift and pull-ups, or a pulling movement is going to be a main entree. Now I'm going to do some secondary complementary workouts, like my other pull movements. I'll do some single arm cable pulls or some dumbbell rows for my chest. My secondary movements could be dips. They could be, different variations of single arm presses. But that way you've got your main entree, but you're not over exhausting. And I think that a lot of people can have fun with that. It's different.
And I have to make sure I'm not like, because if I'm sore from squats, I'm going to be less likely to want to do deadlifts, right? So I got to like kind of, maybe, and it's another interesting conversation, right? I think I had a kettlebell trainer for a while who was trained under that guy, Pavel Tsatsouline. Yeah.
Yep.
The guy who brought the kettlebell to America. And he's had some episodes on Tim Ferriss' podcast. And he talks about like, here in America, we train, to be like bodybuilders, to try to build muscle and go to failure and do every set to failure and exhaustion, which, yes, you might build bigger muscle that way, but for overall strength and recovery, he's basically saying you don't have to go to failure every set. And that's what allows you to work out more, right? More frequency throughout the week, because you're not sore for 2 days after a workout.
Exactly. So when you said deadlift is going to be harder after squat. It doesn't need to be. Like, let's just think about this. Let's say you're a power lifter, and this is how power lifters train. Do you think that power lifters only are working on squat, once per week? No way. They're squatting almost every day. Now, they're giving themselves rest. They're not going to max out by any means, but we know with a lot of things in life, like creating art or business projects, the more we do in repetition wise, the better we're going to be able to perform. So it doesn't mean we're going to get stronger every time, but we're going to master that movement better. And so that's part of what I'm explaining when we're repeating similar muscles. You think about this, you're tapping and sending that muscle building signal without overdoing it. I like to use the analogy of like an amplifier to a speaker. Like, if you had too much power, it's going to blow the speaker, or the sunburn effect. You're going to be, you're going to burn it out. But just that right amount of it. And you can think, I guess, more like the suntan, like you're getting enough to prime without overdoing it. Give yourself 48 hours to recover, which we know, you can recover the majority of that. And then, your recovery, that load that you felt, you're going to have time to recover for it later in the week as well. Like later in the week, you're not going to be doing heavy as weight. You'll be focusing maybe on a different element. So it's not like you're doing legs every day that are going to be maxed out squats. You'll do some movements that will focus more on like stability, within mobility, later in the week. And then you give yourself, a couple of days to be able to recover. And that's where it's a little bit subjective, is you're going to build a tolerance for this as well. Things are going to change. And you could probably relate to it if you played around with intermittent fasting. At first, it was challenging because it was different. Plus your energy was like, it preferred this constant, easy energy source. But after a while, you're like, wow, actually I've adapted. I feel a lot better. And I think the same thing goes with how you're training.
Yeah, that's really good stuff. That's really good insight. And I do want to ask you also about cardio and how that fits in for most people, but I do want to kind of take it back a notch, because I know, you and I, and especially you are, you're training almost every day. I'm trying to do strength training 4 times a week. Ideally, if I feel like I'm really beat up, I might only do 3, but most weeks I'm trying to get 4 if I'm not traveling. And then I'm trying to do cardio or mobility on like at least 2 of the days when I'm off. So I feel like I'm pretty comfortable with it, which I think I need to get uncomfortable and switch things up a little bit for sure. But for the average person, right? So a lot of people listening right now, they haven't been training maybe for many, many years like you and I have. Maybe they want to get into something. They want to develop a routine. They're not realistically going to go to the gym 5 or even 4 days a week. I try to tell people, I'm in some business mastermind groups, and it's like, man, like some of these people are so successful in business, so wealthy, but yet they're overweight, they're out of shape. They're not, and I tell them, guys, what's the point of making millions and millions of dollars if you pass away at age 65 when you could have lived to 95, right? Like, It's just crazy to me. And so I'm just trying to get people in many instances to take a baby step. Like, hey man, just 2 to 3 times a week for an hour each time, like just get started with some strength training, right? Like at least hit one body part, each body part once a week or something like that. What's kind of your advice, and what's kind of like the minimum, if someone was listening, they're like, look, I ain't going to the gym 5-6 days a week. I don't, I just want to get in better health. But, so let's say we give them 2 to 3 hours a week. What do you think?
So it depending on the goals, like 100%. And it's not just because I'm a meathead, like I'm going to prioritize strength training from a longevity perspective and what it will do from a efficiency standpoint to building muscle and burning fat in our cardiovascular health. So strength training is going to do everything that your cardio is doing as far as if your goal is to burn fat. Now, cardio is very helpful for our heart health. It's very helpful for recovery and circulation. So to sum up, like if I had 2 or 3 hours to allot, like ideally I would do a little bit of both, but I mean, I would prioritize weight training. If you're new to it, drop in a class, like literally look up a local gym, and almost everywhere will give you a trial for 7 days free or whatever, but just try out a couple classes, see if it's something that you like. If you want to just go to a local gym and you feel like you don't know what you're doing, hire a trainer. It's such a good investment. Like you don't need to use a trainer forever. Use the trainer for 2 sessions or 10 sessions, but I promise it's a good investment because you'll be able to speed up that gap that you have of trying to figure out everything on your own. So I would train, if I had that limited time, I would prioritize 3 training sessions per week that give you some resistance training. So beginner, you can use resistance bands or cable workout, but just think you're trying to do something to push your muscles, you're trying to do something to pull, you're doing a leg movement, and you can start out with, machines if you wanted, but that 3 times per week. And then the cardio aspect, look for, this is as I've worked with people of advanced age and different demographics, like look for low impact cardio. Like you don't need to be breathing super heavy and running hard, which can, people overdo it a lot of times. And I think that that's causing more stress. Walk more, like literally 10-minute walks after meals have been shown to lower your postprandial blood sugar and has been shown to be as effective as metformin, which is the number one medication for people with diabetes. A lot of people use it for longevity purposes, but walking 3 10-minute walks after your main meals has been shown to be as effective. That's pretty crazy, with more positive side effects. So that is such an easy, low-hanging fruit commitment to do. But just know that if you're going to go to the gym and be doing cardio for 30, 45 minutes, your time would be spent better doing some strength training, resistance training. And if you have the extra time, sprinkle in some cardio. Like for me, I have no shame. Sometimes I'll walk on an incline in a treadmill and I'll review like positive affirmations, I'll review emails. I will listen to a podcast for 20 minutes, 30 minutes at a time. That's always the leanest that I am when I do that first thing in the morning after a mobility routine, when I can make time for it. But sometimes my schedule doesn't allow it. For instance, this morning, I took my dog on a jog around a creek that's near our house. And it's like a 1.3 mile loop. And I just jog really slow. I stop a little bit here and there. That's on an empty stomach in the morning. If I'm trying to really get lean, like I think cardio can play a little bit of a role, but you don't want to just come out of the gate and do tons of cardio and lifting immediately, because then you won't have any levers to pull. So strength training is the big priority. If you're going to prioritize anything, the cardio, sprinkling it in, keep it lower stress in my opinion. Get in that fat burning zone of your heart rate doesn't need to be above 80% of your maximum heart rate. There's, the time and place for it. I would say the high intensity stuff that we see people doing, like once or twice per week, if you want to combine that with your strength training, do something low impact, like a rower machine or an assault bike. That's the bike with the handles. And like push yourself for 20, 30 seconds and then give yourself the same amount recovery, 20, 30 seconds. Do a few sessions like that to get yourself breathing heavy in periods of like 5 minutes at a time. I know it's a lot of information, but that way you're getting a variety. You got the strength training, you got the cardiovascular health, because you want to be able to, if you go on a hike, you don't want to be breathing heavy going up a flight of stairs. So sprinkling it in, again, associating that you're going to feel better after. Sometimes, you're going to feel better during it, but it's going to contribute to the quality of your life. I think it's a little magic pill that you can give yourself, like a gift. You just got to make the time for it, and you have to associate that you'll feel better. And if you got a busy schedule, watch how much more effective you are if you can wake up in the morning and do something active for as little as 10 minutes.
Yeah. I love that. That's great. And another trick, a lot of times if I'm like, oh man, I don't really feel like, going to the gym today or something, I'm like, okay, I'm just going to go and I'm going to walk on the treadmill for 20 minutes and do some stretching. And by the time I've done that, I'm ready. I'm like, oh, I'm ready to work out now. So a lot of times just getting that, getting in motion. And you know what, there's been a few times where I'm like, you know what, I did my warm-ups and some stretching or mobility, and I'm like, I'm just too beat up right now, but at least I feel better for doing what I did. And I do really like what you said too. I think some people lack the confidence. They're like, oh, it's a little overwhelming to go to the gym with all these fit people lifting all these weights, and I don't really know what I'm doing. So I do really think what you said is a really good point. Either just jump in a class or get with a trainer. And again, this doesn't have to be, people look at the price tag of a trainer. Sometimes they're like, I can't afford that. It's like, just buy 4 sessions, 8 sessions to start. Right. And then, you can continue or not continue after, but at least you have someone walk you through and build up your confidence so you can at least do those same workouts later on if they're not around, you know?
Oh gosh. And I could give you a million reasons how you can justify this, but like here, my clients that I've worked with pick my brain about everything. So the time, the money that I've invested in my education and all this experience, like, so let's say I work with a client for an hour and I don't work one-on-one in person anymore, but like, let's say I did that in that hour, ask a bunch of questions. I'll probably keep you working, but like, say, here's what I'm eating. What do you think about that? Like, you now are getting advice from an expert in what they're doing to be able to observe your habits, give you some feedback. And so here's how you justify it. Like, every now and then we go out and we get an expensive meal that's maybe $50, $75, or maybe $100. Save that up and buy a trainer session. You can buy one-time trainer sessions at gyms and just try that out and say, it's a big investment. And you might find that, hey, that's an investment that it's worth paying. Like, I have clients that I worked with for like a decade that I was training 4 or 5 times per week, at $100 a session. Like, that's how much value people saw in how much better they felt, because then they could perform better. Like, then if you have more energy, that's such an important metric, you can show up better in what you're doing with work. You have more creativity and confidence to bring it to everything else you're doing. So, and another thing is, this is really helpful. Listen to this. Like, you got to understand, like, all the people that look like they're in good shape and they've the consistency, they've been doing it for years, know that those people don't wake up and feel like doing it every morning. Like, I'll speak for myself. Like, there's times where my body's tight. I slept funny. I ache, but like you said, I'll hop on the treadmill or do something to get going. And then after 10 minutes, 15 minutes, I'm like, wow, actually, I feel a lot better. And I plan on doing it. But then there's some days where, like you said, I'm going to back off. And today is going to be a light, easy day for me. I'm glad I got some blood flow in there, but that's so important to understand that, like, you're not going to feel like it every day. There's going to be a lot of days where you feel the opposite. You don't feel like it, but you do it anyway. If you have pain or discomfort, address it and find a way to work around that or address it so you're not causing more damage. But know that the majority of the time, it's gonna start to click. You're gonna associate how much better you feel with it. You're gonna get sick less. All the other million benefits that come along with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think really people, it's amazing to me. This is one thing just in general, again, back to like the business mastermind groups and just in general, people, it's like, even recently we had someone who, they're not rich, but they're doing okay. And like, she's like, oh no, those Pilates sessions at the gym are going to be $200 a month or something like that. And just like, it's too expensive for me. It's like, we know you go out and go to all these fancy restaurants. We've seen your purses. Like, we know, like, how are you sacrificing the most important thing in your life? Like, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. And so especially for those of you listening that have money or at least middle class, like, there's no excuse, to not invest in your health when it's the most important thing in your life. And I think a lot of people don't actually take the time to think about that. Like, actually think about like, hey, what is the most important thing in my life? And then realizing like, oh yeah, if I don't have my health, like literally nothing else matters. Like, I may not even, if I don't have my health, I may not even meet my grandkids versus like, I helped raise my grandkids for the first 30 years of their life. Like, there's just so many, like when you think about it at a high level, how important it is. I just hope that this helps people to think about prioritizing that over. And I tell people too, like busy business people, and they're like, oh, I'm just so busy with work and this and that. And it's like, what's more important, work or your health? Oh, health is, but I'm just busy. Okay. So if health is more important, then go to the gym before you work, or go to the gym in the middle of the day, while you're working. Take an hour out of your work day and go. Like, make this a priority. So
I agree. I love your passion for it. And it's you obviously you have a voice and a platform to be able to demonstrate, how when you feel better, overall you're going to perform that much better. And it's like, gosh, I wish so much like my family and the people I care for most, would buy into that. And it's to me, like, I'm a creative person. So like, I can give people so many different ideas, like with the fitness snack, or parking further away, or just getting, find a reason to get out and stay moving more. And it's like, it's strange that more people don't don't prioritize it. But it's not a coincidence that people that take care of their health, it's so much more important than, it's not just about living a lot of years, which is certainly, that is very important, but it's the quality of life.
Right.
Like I know people that are in their 60s and 70s and they don't have to say no to anything. They can still take care of themselves. They can still move around, travel. And I mean, people even in their 80s, but like in the 60s and 70s, they're still up for the adventures of life. And so it's like, you make all this money, you save up, and then you get to age 60, if you made it that far. And then it's like, well, what can you do with it now? Wouldn't it be fun to be able to, I always talked about just the adventure of life, just to be able to use your body to its full capability.
Yeah. I want to play soccer and basketball with my grandkids and things like that, So let me ask you real quick. I know we don't have too much time left, but I did want to ask you about what your diet these days. So we spoke about it in one of the first podcast episodes a little bit, but what does your diet look like these days? What's kind of your breakfast, lunch, and dinner or schedule these days?
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I look back on it, and just to give you guys an idea, I mean, I journal, I do monthly reviews literally, and it's very similar. It's simple. It's just as far as like, what are the common foods I'm eating? Like, am I counting my calories? Am I doing carb cycling or anything like that? I mean, I've been doing that for years. I can literally look back like 4 or 5 years. Like if I say a picture of myself and be like, what was my training and diet like? And my training is the same thing. I take notes. But so with my nutrition, it's been an evolution. Like for me, I want to feel well. So number one, I want to make sure that like my digestive health feels good. And that was a journey. I mean, in my 20s, I strived to look a certain way and just pile down protein and had gassiness and I had a lot of digestive discomfort. And then I went plant-based for a while and I almost felt worse at different times. So right now I still practice a form of, time restricted eating in most days. And for me, it just depends. Like I say it's at least 12 hours, meaning if I ate at 8 o'clock, I'm not going to eat till after 8, but it's typically on average, always about 14 hours. I'm not going as extreme where I need to go 16 to 18 hours like I've done in the past. But like, here's my theory behind that is I'm allowing whatever I ate in the evening before to be fully digested to feel light. If that got in the way of me being able to eat enough calories for my energy, like it doesn't bother me if I need to start eating earlier based on how my day is, but I have a snapshot of how busy my day is going to be the next day. And I typically will do something, move around, be somewhat active before I have my meal one. But my first meal pretty consistently is a form of protein pancakes. And I'll do, sometimes it's just coconut flour and an egg and like Peak Performance plant-based, protein. I'll put some sugar-free chocolate chips, and then I'll have a couple eggs with it. And sometimes I'll use one of those like pre-made pancake mixes, like Birch Bender's like paleo keto mix, just to have an easy base. It comes together in like 5 minutes. And I'd say like 4 or 5 out of 7 of the days, it literally is having pancakes and a couple eggs. And then if it's a day where I'm focused on lower carbs, I'll add some avocado with the eggs. And then if I'm doing a higher carb day, which I'll do a couple days per week, I consider it like a refeed. My first meal, my pancakes might have sprouted gluten-free oats. I find that I digest those really well. And then I'll have eggs and maybe a little bit more egg whites, but I'm prioritizing same thing, same amount of protein in the morning. It's typically about 35 to 40 grams. And then the difference is I might have a little extra carbs on that higher carb day. And that's going to come after my training. And then midday meal is typically some sort of fish based, like whether it's wild salmon, and I'll have it in like a bowl, like arugula salad with some apple cider vinegar, olive oil, like a quick little vinaigrette that I'll make. Sometimes I'm having mackerel, like good quality source mackerel or sardines with avocado. And to make that more of a complete protein meal, I'll add a couple hard-boiled eggs. So it's very common. I'm gonna do one of those because how quick it comes together. I can make that in 5 minutes. I like how it tastes. I'm adding in cultured vegetables daily to most of my, it's a couple of my meals, but especially to that mid-meal and dinner. And what I mean by that is kimchi or like a sauerkraut type of thing that's going to help feed good bacteria. I get my prebiotics and probiotics from that. And that's like a condiment that's lower calorie. It's not going to be super high in sodium or fat or anything. And then otherwise lunch could be leftovers from like an Instant Pot meal. If I had, chicken thighs or my own barbacoa type of beef that I made. So that's very common. And then dinner is going to be, maybe a little bit bigger meal where I'm having maybe skirt steak or, grass-fed beef or fish. Occasionally I'll go lighter on the meat if, maybe once per week. And then I'll have more vegetables where I'm gonna have some like roasted vegetables. I could do broccolini or broccoli, but it's very common. Those are my 3 base meals. It's like choosing a protein portion with some veggies for that last meal. If it's a higher carb day, I'll add in, I like potatoes. I think that I do really well with them. So I'll do russet potatoes or sweet potatoes. I do sweet potato rice. Sometimes I'll buy a bag that's a mix of sweet potato and cauliflower rice because it's really satisfying. So those 3 base meals are pretty consistent. And then I'll have like a cleanup meal, and that is going to pick up the calories that I need, because I find that, I underate for a long time. I stayed really lean, but I think that my hormones maybe suffered a little bit from being at too much of a calorie deficit. So my cleanup meal can sometimes just be a bigger portion of dinner, or I'll have what I call a pro bowl, where it's giving me an extra 25, 30 grams of protein. I'll put in some like collagen protein with like some yogurt, or sometimes like some oats, or like homemade ice cream that I'll make by blending up some berries, or it's just a bowl with frozen berries, some collagen protein, some yogurt. But it's a cleanup. If I was going higher carbs, I'm going to add in, maybe some extra carbohydrates just to get that refeed that my body needs. But I don't obsess over tracking calories. I do somewhat follow my macros loosely, so for instance, on most days I'm around 2,500 calories. On that higher refeed day once a week, I'm around 3,000 calories. And for me, it's fun. It gives me variety. I don't obsess over it and I don't get neurotic over it, but I know that I can associate when I'm doing that more strictly. I can lean down a little faster, but I then also go on diet breaks, once every couple months, where I bump up the calories a little bit more and know that that's going to allow me to find more harmony and balance things out.
Nice. Yeah, that's a really good and you're, to be clear, you're very active, right? You're working out almost every day essentially. And so you're probably eating a little more than maybe, if the average person's only working out 2 to 3 hours a week or something like that, most likely they may not need all the extra, carbs and stuff like that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll be the first to tell you, carbohydrates play a good role for recovery, if you're training a lot, but how active you are in your day is going to influence how your body's going to tolerate glucose, like the sugar that your body gets from carbohydrates, and how you tolerate food. So I tell people, if you're not training more than 2 times per week, you really don't need that much carbohydrates. You could just think protein, vegetables, and fruit, and you're going to be just fine, and probably lower sugar fruit there. You'll probably do better. But for somebody that's really active, and trust me, I battled with that too, because it's like, you hear all this information of like, oh, avoiding carbs, but like, you got to go with what works for you. Like I do really well with fruit, like berries. I'll do bananas occasionally, and, papaya. My body feels really good with it. And I don't have, a negative reaction from that, but you have to, like, I can judge it based on my digestive health. I do blood work regularly. And for me, like it took years to figure it out, but it was worth it. And so I really encourage people, like, just because your friend got incredible results with keto, it might work for you for a period of time, but maybe you need to mix it up a little bit. Or just because your friend does tons of carbs, you might not have the same energy system that they do in the way that they're burning things. So I don't want to overcomplicate things, but it's really, you got to have fun with it and try it out for a period of time, some different foods. And for me, and what I tell people, have 3 go-to breakfasts, 3 go-to lunch type of meals, 3 go-to dinners, and then just play around and mix those up a little bit, and you can have a lot of variety. And if that overwhelms you, find your friend or your mentor from afar and ask them, like, what are 3 meals you eat for first, and borrow some inspiration. I hope that helps.
Yeah. That's really good. That's
one thing I incorporate a lot, this is important to hear, like, And I notice it without a doubt. It's almost like one of the, we got protein, carbs, and fat, but like collagen that I get either through supplementation of collagen or bone broth, like daily, I'm getting some of that in. And I just feel like it's undeniable that my skin, my joints, my tendons just feel better. And it's just something that's worth doing, whether I'm using bone broth and sipping on it or just adding in collagen to, to my meals throughout the day. I find that diversifying that amino acid profile, my digestive system feels so much better. Like I promise, for if someone that has digestive issue, especially if it could be IBS or like kind of leaky gut, impermeable gut, that adding some extra collagen is something that can help repair that for so many people.
Yeah. I like that as well. I'm definitely doing at least 20 grams of collagen every day, and probably would rather be up to 30 grams or so, ideally. So, man, this has been awesome, Jason. Thank you so much. That was a lot of knowledge we dropped there in, you talked about the whole strength training and your routines around there. We talked about difference between bro splits and push and pull and different, we talked about how to make it easier for people to get started. We talked about your diet and nutrition. So this was extremely helpful. We're really grateful that you were able to share this with the Peak Performance community. And if people want to learn more from you directly, what's the best place for them to find you?
Yeah, I mean, if you search, thank you, by the way. I always have fun. You can tell I'm very passionate about this. And I also want to leave you guys with, there's a quote probably that sounds a lot better, but I mean, there's multiple roads and routes to your destination. So like, have fun with that. Be open-minded to that when you're thinking about what you guys want to do and try it. And like, don't let that overwhelm you, but like, just know that I've evolved a lot. I've been doing this health and fitness stuff for over 15 years, and I'm still learning, and I'm staying open-minded, and that keeps it fun. But you can see anywhere, my name is Jason Sani, Sani, whether it's Instagram or some of the Peak Performance content, YouTube. And I've always loved to be a resource. I'm obviously very passionate about this. So if people have questions, I'm happy to be a resource in any way.
Awesome, man. Yeah. Thank you so much, man. We really appreciate it. This was some incredible knowledge you just shared with everyone. And yeah, thanks again. And we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Hey, always a pleasure. Looking forward to it.